As we gather here in 2026, it is impossible to ignore the palpable sense of unease that pervades global discourse. We are living through a period of profound and rapid transformation, one that the World Economic Forum, in its latest Global Risks Report, describes as standing on a precipice. The old certainties of the post-Cold War era have eroded, replaced by a new, more fragmented, and intensely competitive world order. The goal of this lecture is to provide a structured analysis of the multiple, overlapping crises that define our present moment. We will not simply list problems, but will instead explore their interconnections, their root causes, and their potential trajectories. We will draw heavily on the latest data from the Global Risks Report 2026, a survey of over 1,300 global experts, to build a fact-based understanding of our world. Our journey will take us through the landscape of geopolitical strife, economic fragility, social decay, technological disruption, and environmental peril. We will see that while the challenges are immense, the future is not yet written. It depends on the choices we make today. The core thesis of this lecture is this: we have entered the age of competition, where geoeconomic confrontation has become the primary lens through which global interactions are viewed, exacerbating every other risk we face and testing the resilience of our institutions and societies to their breaking point. The political landscape of 2026 is defined by a fundamental shift away from multilateralism and towards a multipolar, and often confrontational, state of affairs. The era of globalization, characterized by ever-deepening cooperation, has been replaced by an era of fragmentation, where nations increasingly view trade, finance, and technology as weapons to be wielded for strategic advantage. For the first time, geoeconomic confrontation has topped the World Economic Forum's list of the most severe risks for the year 2026 and the two-year outlook. What does this mean in practice? It is the use of economic tools to achieve geopolitical goals. This goes far beyond simple tariffs. It includes weaponized supply chains. Critical resources, from microchips to rare earth minerals and energy supplies, are no longer just commodities but tools of leverage. Nations are actively reshoring critical industries and forming exclusive blocs to ensure their own security, often at the expense of global efficiency. Targeted sanctions and export controls. We are seeing an unprecedented rise in the use of sanctions, technology export bans, and investment screening mechanisms. These are designed to hinder the strategic advancement of rivals, particularly in sensitive areas like artificial intelligence, AI, and quantum computing. The death of multilateralism. The institutions built to foster global cooperation, such as the World Trade Organization, are increasingly sidelined. Its dispute settlement mechanism is handling a fraction of the cases it did just a few years ago. Major platforms like the G20 struggle to find consensus, leading nations to form smaller, more exclusive clubs aligned with their strategic interests. A staggering 68% of global experts expect the next decade to be defined by a more fragmented, multipolar order, with only 6% believing in a revival of the post-war international system. While geoeconomic confrontation is the new number one, it has not replaced the old threat of state-based armed conflict, which now sits as the second most likely risk to trigger a global crisis in 2026. The world is witnessing the highest number of active conflicts since World War II. Wars in Eastern Europe and the Middle East continue to grind on, with little sign of diplomatic resolution, causing immense humanitarian suffering and destabilizing entire regions. The expiration of key nuclear arms control treaties adds another layer of existential danger, raising the specter of a new, more unpredictable arms race. These grand strategic tensions have profound local consequences. A recent example is the wave of protests that have erupted in Iran. What began in late 2025 as demonstrations against crippling economic hardship, soaring unemployment, and inflation quickly morphed into a broader challenge to the political establishment. Students at major universities in Tehran and Mashhad have been at the forefront, chanting slogans against the supreme leader and clashing with security forces. The government's response has been violently repressive, with human rights groups estimating thousands of deaths in recent crackdowns. This internal instability is inextricably linked to international pressures, particularly heightened tensions with the United States over its nuclear program. The situation in Iran is a perfect storm, demonstrating how economic failure, political repression, and great power rivalry can combine to ignite a societal crisis. Turning to the economic sphere, the picture is one of deep-seated fragility. While the global economy has shown some resilience, this masks dangerous underlying trends and an uneven, K-shaped recovery where the wealthy pull ahead while everyone else falls behind. According to the Global Risks Report 2026, economic risks have shown the sharpest increase in severity over the last year. Fears of an economic downturn and inflation have both surged 8 places in the rankings. This is driven by a toxic mix of factors: mounting global debt. Global debt has ballooned to a staggering $251 trillion, representing 235% of global GDP. In a high-interest rate environment, servicing this debt becomes crippling for both developed and developing nations, crowding out public investment in essential services and infrastructure. Volatile markets and asset bubbles. The combination of high debt, uncertain returns on speculative investments like AI, and geopolitical shocks creates a tinderbox for financial volatility. The risk of an asset bubble burst has also climbed significantly, slowing growth. Global economic growth is projected to dip to 2.7% in 2026, well below the pre-pandemic average. This slowdown is not uniform, however. The most troubling aspect of the current economic moment is its profound inequality. The World Bank notes that while 90% of advanced economies have per capita incomes above pre-pandemic levels, over a quarter of emerging market and developing economies do not. This divergence creates a world of haves and have-nots on both a global and a national scale. On the ground, this means that low-income households, rural communities, and women are disproportionately bearing the burden of cost of living pressures. This economic pain is a primary driver of the social and political instability we will discuss next. The Edelman Trust Barometer highlights this starkly, revealing that high-income and low-income populations now live in completely opposing institutional realities, with the latter far more likely to view governments, media, and businesses as unethical. The political and economic crises we've outlined are both a cause and a consequence of a deep social crisis. The very fabric of our societies is fraying, characterized by polarization, eroding trust, and a pervasive sense of disillusionment. Societal polarization remains a fixture in the top ranks of global risks, coming in third for the 2-year outlook. This isn't just political disagreement. It's a fundamental streets versus elites narrative that's taking hold across both established and emerging democracies. People are retreating into like-minded echo chambers, losing the ability to engage in constructive dialogue with those who hold different views. This polarization paralyzes government, prevents effective crisis response, and creates fertile ground for extremism. Underpinning polarization is a catastrophic collapse of trust in institutions. Governments, media, and even NGOs are increasingly seen as serving the interests of a corrupt elite rather than the public good. This is intimately linked to inequality, which the WEF has identified as the most interconnected global risk for the second year in a row. It is the engine that fuels many other risks. When people feel the system is rigged against them, when social mobility stalls, and when economic opportunity vanishes, they become susceptible to populist narratives, conspiracy theories, and disinformation that offer simple explanations for their complex frustrations. For the first time in recent years, the erosion of human rights and/or civic freedoms has entered the top 10 short-term risks, moving up 2 positions. This manifests in crackdowns on peaceful protest, as seen in Iran, increasing restrictions on civil society, and a rise in authoritarian governance styles, even in countries with democratic traditions. The space for civic discourse is shrinking at exactly the moment we need it most. No lecture on the current state of the world would be complete without a deep dive into technology, specifically artificial intelligence. It is the ultimate double-edged sword, representing our greatest opportunity and a fast-mounting risk. In the short term, misinformation and disinformation is ranked as the second most severe global risk. The 2020s have taught us that a lie can circle the globe before the truth gets its boots on. Now, generative AI has made creating convincing fake-tent deepfakes, synthetic voices, entirely fabricated news articles easier, cheaper, and more scalable than ever before. This superweapon of disinformation is used to corrode public discourse and erode trust in facts, interfere with elections and democratic processes, weaken societal crisis response as seen during the pandemic when conflicting information cost lives, exacerbate societal polarization by feeding each side a diet of content that confirms its biases. While disinformation is today's problem, the adverse outcomes of AI technologies represent the risk with the most dramatic trajectory. It ranks 30th in the 2-year outlook, but skyrockets to 5th in the 10-year outlook. Experts are deeply concerned about what happens when AI integrates more fully into every aspect of our lives without adequate guardrails. These concerns include labor market devastation. AI automation could disrupt labor markets much faster than regulatory or social safety nets can respond, leading to mass job displacement and a crisis of identity and meaning for millions of workers. Geopolitical instability. The race for AI supremacy is intensifying geoeconomic confrontation. The integration of AI into military systems raises the risk of accidents and rapid, uncontrolled escalation of conflicts, widening inequality. The benefits of the AI revolution are accruing to a tiny handful of individuals, companies, and nations, primarily in the global north. This AI inequality will further entrench global economic divides as AI superpowers boost their productivity while lower-income countries are left behind. Existential questions. The report notes that progress in AI and quantum computing will fuel each other, creating cascading risk impacts that we are only beginning to comprehend. Finally, we must address the elephant in the room, or rather, the planet we are destroying. There is a deeply troubling trend in this year's risk analysis, a significant short-term reprioritization away from environmental concerns. In the 2-year outlook, environmental risks have seen the largest decline in ranking. Critical change to Earth systems fell 7 places, and biodiversity loss fell 5 places. This does not mean the problems have gone away. It means that, in the face of immediate geopolitical and economic shocks, leaders and experts are deprioritizing them. The urgent has once again overtaken the important. The INSEAD faculty survey reflects this, with climate change dropping as a top business priority compared to the previous year. However, when the lens is extended to the next decade, the environmental picture is stark. The top 3 long-term risks are all environmental. 1. Extreme weather events. 2. Biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse. 3. Critical change to Earth systems. Nearly 3/4 of respondents expect a turbulent or stormy environmental outlook over the next 10 years. Many climate scientists now believe that the internationally agreed-upon goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is impossible to achieve. The consequences will be devastating: more frequent and intense floods, droughts and fires, food and water shortages, mass displacement, and increased conflict over dwindling resources. We are trading short-term economic and geopolitical comfort for long-term planetary catastrophe. The sharp decline in concern for biodiversity loss is particularly alarming, as it is the risk with the sharpest worsening in its severity score when moving from the 2-year to the 10-year outlook. An ecosystem that collapses does not recover on a human timescale. As we conclude this lecture, the picture I have painted is, by necessity, dark. We are navigating an age of competition, marked by geoeconomic warfare, persistent conflict, economic fragility, social decay, technological anxiety, and environmental backsliding. Half of the world's experts see a turbulent or stormy future ahead for the next 2 years, and this pessimism deepens 57% over the next decade. It would be easy to succumb to despair, but that is not the purpose of this lecture. The purpose is to understand, and through understanding, to empower. The Global Risks Report itself reminds us that none of these risks are a foregone conclusion. The future is not a single, fixed path, but a range of possible trajectories. The path we end on depends on the decisions we make today as a global community. The old models of cooperation are dead. We cannot rely on the multilateral institutions of the 20th century to solve the problems of the 21st. But cooperation itself is not dead. It is simply evolving. We need a new spirit of dialogue. As the World Economic Forum's 2026 annual meeting suggests, a pragmatic recognition that even amidst fierce competition, collaborative approaches remain essential to sustain economic growth, accelerate innovation responsibly, and build the adaptive capacity to weather the storms ahead. This task does not fall solely to presidents and CEOs. It falls to all of us. It requires us to reject the narratives of polarization and engage with those who hold different views, demand accountability and transparency from our institutions, become critical consumers of information to starve the disinformation economy, hold our leaders accountable for not sacrificing long-term environmental health for short-term political gain. We are living in the age of competition, but it is also an age of choice. We can choose to let competition degenerate into chaos, or we can choose to build new bridges, forge new forms of cooperation, and navigate these treacherous waters together. The future is not yet determined. It is ours to shape. The time for clear-eyed understanding and decisive, collective action is now.